We're on episode 5 of the Disruptive Love podcast, and I'm David Bennett.
And I'm Jonathan Bennett.
Our goal is to positively disrupt the bad in dating and relationships, so please join us in that by subscribing to this podcast, disruptive.love, and following us on Twitter and Facebook. You can follow us at Disruptive Love, one word, on both of those platforms. Also, I want to thank Joshua Wagner, who's producing all of this and making everything look amazing. Today we have Christelyn Karazin, an author, columnist, and expert on interracial dating. She's the author of Swirling, How to Date, Mate, and Relate, Mixing Race, Culture, and Creed, and the creator of the best-selling online course, The Pink Pill, Strategies for Living Well to the Extreme. She's also a wife and mother to 4 children, and, in our opinion, an overall very cool person. So, welcome, Christelyn. We're very glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
So we've given you this introduction, so why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself in your own words and some of your brands.
Okay. Oh, wow. That is a broad question. And I guess I'll start with what brought me to the journey to write about interracial relationships, because
great.
This is a relationship show and that makes, sense. So, I met my husband on a Yahoo chat room back in 1999. And this was
cool.
when
the original online dating, yes.
Yes. And you guys know that Yahoo used to be separated by regions. And so you could, kind of mingle in different rooms based on where you were in the world. And so I lived in a little hick town called Lancaster, California, but the closest major city was Los Angeles. So I would mingle in that room. And that's where I met my husband. And, he was funny, and he had a really nice dry wit, and he sent me a picture. This was back when you had to email pictures. And so he emailed a picture of me, of him with Santa Claus that past Christmas. And he looked really sweet. And I thought, a guy who looks like that posing with Santa Claus can't be a serial killer. So I decided to meet him for a date on the next day. And he wasn't a serial killer. He was actually very nice. And we dated for a few years and we got married. But the thing that was interesting was that my Black girlfriends, when it became obvious that it was serious and that we may get married, they kept asking me, how did you do that? Because I heard that white men really don't, they'll never take you home, and they're not serious, and they're just going to use you. And so how did you do that? I mean, there was so much misinformation about these relationships, and statistically they are the least likely to happen. So my girlfriend's befuddlement combined with these statistics kind of inspired me to pursue writing about it in a real way. And I pitched it to publishers. I was a writer and a publicist before this, and I wrote for magazines like Better Homes and Gardens and Women's Day. And while I was at a conference, I pitched the idea, and the publicists loved it. They loved it. They said that there was no book really out there about interracial relationships from a Black woman's perspective. So they were like, go for it. Send us a proposal. And I sent out the proposal to 3 different publishing companies and got offers by 3 different ones, and we took the best one.
Nice. Yeah. So you mentioned statistics are kind of against Black women. Well, what do you mean? What's going on there? Like, what's the situation with that?
Well, I think I think that it's really sort of the last big hurdle society has to overcome. And I think it's because Black women have been told for so long that we are the carriers of the race. We are the backbone of the Black community, and dating, particularly a white man, is representative of sort of dating your oppressor, and it's symbolic of, yes, your foremothers were abused by these people. How could you do that? But at the same time, grappling with the hypocrisy of the fact that Black men marry interracially at twice the rate. And their unions are seen as sort of a, and you probably don't know this, a conquering of their oppressor by getting their women.
Okay.
And so it seems like it's okay. But Black women are often told to stay behind. And there's just so many nuances that you probably don't even know. So there's also, there's layers to this. Women who look like me, darker skinned, kinky hair, we're not at the top hierarchy for Black male selection from, like the successful type of Black men. They're looking for lighter skinned, more mixed, exotic looking. And that puts us at a disadvantage because there's a 2 million Black man shortage. And if you don't ideally look in this phenotype that is preferred, you kind of have to get what you get. But what I found was when I opened my options outside of the community, men of other races were like, "You're beautiful. Like, you're at the top for me. Let's go out." And so it was very empowering to come from a position of feeling like there was a scarcity to all of a sudden having all of these options and all of these choices, because once you open yourself up, you never know who will be interested. And the internet has been prolific in facilitating these unions, because again, I met my husband on a Yahoo chat room and we would not have met otherwise. And I'm also a brand ambassador for Interracial Dating Central. They exist and they do really well because people are connecting and meeting who otherwise might not ever meet.
So that brings us to our next question, because it seems like you're doing something that does go against what, maybe people on all sides are going to have some problems with. So I'm sure you've encountered, even in this age of tolerance and, progressive views overall, what kind of problems have you encountered with this? You've mentioned a few, I think. Like what kind of specific pushback maybe?
Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, the pushback that I've mostly gotten since I've started on this track has been from other Black people, particularly Black men, and some Black women who feel like this is an agenda. Why are you pushing this? And, why would you thrust Black women into the arms of their oppressors? And like, they see every white person as, and these types of people, they're not, I've obviously gotten a lot of encouragement from Black women, but there are some Black women who are just completely befuddled by it, even within my own family, where there's just inherent suspicion about the prospect of dating interracially. And so they want you to be extra careful and, vet these men heavily. And sometimes the extra care is more so towards the outsider than the guy inside. So it's like, okay, so I need to make sure that the white guy has this, and this, but the Black dude, he could just be, it doesn't matter, as long as he's Black. And they're like, yes.
They even admit that, huh? There's not. They don't even try to hide that.
Not. It's happened a few times. I've had a woman who said there was a time where she was so against interracial relationships that she would rather her daughter be a baby mama of a black man than be married to a white man. And here's another thing that you need to know is that the black community has a 72% out of wedlock rate. And so combined with the 3 factors of 2 million more black women than black men who are marriageable, the fact that successful black men will date and marry interracially twice as much and as much as 30%. And the fact that we have a huge out of wedlock rate. There's a lot of things that count against us. So if you want to have a certain lifestyle where you want an intact family and you want a traditional, where you're not taking on masculine roles, it's really something that I've touted as a necessity for black women to consider. And I think the hurt comes with having to face the fact that it comes from a position of lacking, and that there's reasons and necessities for it. And I think that it hurts people to actually have to take a look at it and see things that are maybe uncomfortable.
Well, I mean, no one really likes to be uncomfortable, that's for sure. But have you noticed that maybe a shift in generations? Do you see maybe where the younger generation is a little more open to it?
Oh, yes. I mean, I think a lot of it is geographical. I live in California, and girls out here, I'll go to the mall and I'll see them holding hands with, men of all races. And they really are sort of unbothered by all of it, and everybody around is sort of unbothered by it, and it doesn't seem like such a big deal. And that's very encouraging for me. But at the same time, I think some of it is regional, because I still get the letters from girls in their early 20s and, early 30s who are saying that they're having a difficult time expanding their options in their region because it's just not done in their particular area. One thing that I will say, though, when I was out in Columbus, and maybe I just wasn't out at the right time, but I didn't see a lot of interracial couples in Ohio when I was there. So can you speak to that?
Honestly, I don't really know the statistics, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I've seen some, but I wouldn't say I've seen a ton of them. No, in fact, since we met you, I've kept more of an eye out for it, trying to notice. And in the neighborhood we live in, I have noticed a few interracial families. Actually, quite a bit. We have noticed quite a few. In fact, while we were running today, we noticed that because we were talking about this interview. We ran before we came here and noticed quite a bit. And we're like, this is actually what Christelyn will be. She'd be proud of this situation. Yes. So, yeah. Now, what about the whole royal wedding thing? Has that opened up a little more acceptance and tolerance, and maybe even I want to mimic this and find my own prince?
Absolutely. One of the things that is a fear for a lot of black women is that our progeny, because of the issues with colorism within the black community, because there is a hierarchy of, the lighter you are, sort of the better that you are, and the better treated that you are, that somehow you are creating the very women who will eventually erase you and usurp you. And that really is a worry for black women. They feel like, should I be creating, because if you are going to marry out of your race and the man is Hispanic, Asian, white, there's a strong chance that your child will be much lighter skinned than you are. And to see Meghan Markle, who is a proud biracial, beautiful woman, very well adjusted, with a black mother and a white father, simply be amazing and capture the heart of a prince. Meghan Markle is my daughter. I have 3 daughters, and she signifies my daughter. And so my heart is so full of pride for that situation, because she always acknowledged that she was proud of both sides, and that her relationship, her mother is very important to her, and it wasn't a situation where it was imitation of life. You've heard of that movie, right? Where it's an old movie where a biracial woman passes for white, and she desperately tries to hide her mother, who is not only black, but she's also a maid, and so she desperately tries to hide her mother. So this was, I think that movie was out in the 30s or 40s, and that's not the case. This is not an imitation of life situation. This is a young, successful, accomplished woman who's very much proud of her mother and the values that she instilled with her and her heritage. And you could see that at the wedding. There were, there was the traditional, but there was also the Negro spirituals. I mean, if you look at her background from her black side, she is a descendant of slaves. And so the fact that a young girl can be a descendant of slaves, this is the first time ever an American who's been a descendant of slaves has been married into royalty with a black mother. That is huge.
Wow, that's impressive. I didn't know all this, actually. I'm learning. I don't really follow the royal home.
No.
We don't really follow the royals that much.
This is great information.
This is great information, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's pretty interesting. We did a whole thing on it in Pink Pill, because we were just like, it was one of those things where, she represents our progeny, and the way that she carries herself and her pride for everything who she is very encouraging for Black women who feel like if they, color outside of the lines, that they are still going to be able to hold on to their heritage and be able to pass that on and have their children embrace that. It's very important to them.
So let's say you have someone approach you and say, okay, I am open, I'm open to this interracial dating thing. I want to give it a try. So what would you recommend a Black woman do if she wants to attract a white guy? Like, practically speaking, what would you recommend?
Well, there's a couple of things.
Okay.
First thing is that she's going to have to get out of her area of comfort. Okay. She's going to have to go in areas that are multicultural, where she has the opportunity to meet men of other races. So if she lives, for instance, in a predominantly Black neighborhood, she's not going to find as many opportunities to meet men who are open. So the first thing is she's going to have to feel comfortable being able to go outside of her 6-block radius and associate and meet people. The second thing, the best thing that I could say, especially if you're in an interracial dating desert, that's what I call places where you don't see a lot of it, is try online dating. Online dating is really the best way that you can meet somebody who is open to you. And one thing that I've found is that Black women really need to give up their presuppositions about what they think white men in particular like. Because what I have found in this work is that a pretty girl is a pretty girl. And if they see a pretty girl, they're going to want to pursue that. And so Um, a lot of it is to just dispel whatever is going on in your mind that makes you think that you're not appealing, because again, it's, you know, when you cast that wide net through interracial dating online, you're able to reach a wider audience, and the numbers are in your favor. So that to me is an essential component to all of it. And also like meetup groups. So say for instance, you're into a certain type of hobby, or you want to learn about art, or you want to learn, or you're hiking or anything like that. Meetup groups are an opportunity to sort of go branch outside of your comfort zone and meet a variety of different people. And you know what's crazy is that there have been people who have met on social media pages like Facebook, in communities like the singles group that I have, Beyond Black and White Singles, where there's actually been connections that way. So basically, online is where you can really, the numbers can be in your favor and put you in, it puts you in an advantage for finding somebody who's open.
And definitely, we'll give a plug. Be sure to contact Christelyn, everybody, because we have seen that group in action.
And it is great.
And it's a great group, and it's an interesting community. It's a very close community, and I noticed that there's a lot of sharing and connecting going on there. It's really exciting.
Yeah, and it's not even just that the community people are meeting each other, because they do have their meetups and they do meet each other, but it's more of also just a support group, and you can kind of bounce ideas off of people, and it's sort of just that another tool in your toolbox, in your expansion of your dating options.
So on the flip side, what about if there is a white guy who wants to expand his horizons? You know, we're all about disrupting and positive expansion of
challenging the status quo.
So if there's a guy who, you know, maybe felt like maybe black women might not be interested in him, or
okay, that is a common concern, and so there's a few things that I would give advice about.
Okay, and
that would be that if you're interested in dating black women, that again, online dating is the way to go, because you can find, especially with like sites like Interracial Dating Central, because everybody there, you know, is they are already pre-approved. They are open to interracial relationships, so there's no fear of rejection. But in person, okay, I was just hit on today. All right. And I'm going to tell you what he did. He just struck up a conversation with me and talked to me. And he gauged by my body language that I was at least friendly. And, you know, when I told him I was married, he was, of course, disappointed. But being able to gauge a person's openness and body language when you speak to them. So even if it's just and I find that people from the Midwest and the South are really good about engaging people and being friendly and nice. And so if you're interested in dating a woman of color, I would suggest that you start engaging them in friendly ways and see how they react. If they're kind of like, they're, you know, she may be interested. If she's very closed off in her body language, or she's just like, whatever, then I would say that you might want to, you know, move on. I would also say that the same advice I would give black women is to find a mixed group, a cultural, multi-ethnic place where people, it's not predominantly one thing over the other, or there's a nice mix of everybody. That gives people sort of the confidence to interact with people who are maybe a little bit different from them. So I would suggest that, but I would say that white men need to get over what's in their head the same way that Black women do, and that the assumption is that a Black woman won't be interested in them, or that a Black woman, like every Black woman is just like worshiping Black men, and that's the only kind of man that they're interested in. There's a lot of assumptions, and they don't even bother. But if you just, okay, it's kind of like when you buy a car. Say you buy a car and you didn't notice it before, but now that you have this car, you notice there's all these cars on the road that are like your car.
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
But you never noticed it before. And it's about your perception. And so there's a lot of women of color who are interested in open. And once you set your perception to be able to see that, you will find that there's a lot more than you might think.
That's very true, because we notice it now ever since we've known you and talk to your group. Every time I see it, I think of you, and I notice it now. And even though Columbus is a bit of a desert from what I've seen, I've still seen examples of it, whereas before it probably slipped under the radar.
Right.
And it sounds like what you're saying is, oh, sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but it sounds like what you're saying is for both sides, it's basically change your mindset to be more open and then just do what you would normally do if you found someone attractive or were interested in someone.
Absolutely. And the thing is that Black women, more than ever before in my entire existence, and I've been around for a while, I'll be 45 next month.
We wouldn't have guessed that. So we would never. You look very good.
Yeah.
So. But we're not hitting on you.
We're not hitting on you. No.
It's one of the benefits of dating Black women is that we do age slowly, and it works. So I'll take it. Is that I've seen more openness than ever before from Black women to dating interracially, because now they're seeing it. Celebrities are doing it. People who they know, they're seeing people out and about, and they're doing it. And sometimes it's sometimes just seeing other people and then imagining yourself doing it and not feeling like, oh my gosh, I can't be this maverick. I don't want to be the first. And once you see that there's a certain number of people, and then you see it on commercials. I mean, in California, we see it on so many commercials. Old Navy commercials, Blue Apron. I mean, they're everywhere. I don't know how it is in other regions, but mixed couples are really sort of becoming predominant in the media. And that's because, you might not know this, Nielsen did a study called The Rise of the Super Consumers. Mm-hmm. And the super consumers are the progeny of couples who are mixed race, who are mixed couples, and their children are claiming more than one ethnicity. And one such combination that does really well are Black women and white men, and that is because these unions statistically last the longest, and they're very they tend to be highly educated and pretty wealthy in terms of household income. And so it's not like when you see these commercials, these guys are doing this out of the kindness of their hearts. No, they're seeing the data and they're saying, wow, this Black woman who has an MBA and makes six figures is marrying this guy who's a lawyer and he's a partner at a firm and they've got super mega bucks. They're married. We need to be, we need to solicit mutual funds or IRAs or stocks or whatever, because they see that this is the buying power is there. and they understand that these couples really want to see themselves and represented, and they're going to go for them. But it's not by accident.
That's awesome, and I'm sure that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle upped that income average quite a bit, which maybe gets even more attention. But one of the things we've noticed, even in our coaching, is that a lot of people, they're reluctant to do something until they feel like someone else has done it and it gets approval. So I think it's great that with the royal wedding, something that is very meaningful and important to a lot of people, it might allow people to come out of the woodwork and say, you know what, they did it. They're getting all this attention, so now I can do it.
Right.
The next question, we've talked about what they can do. What are some of the mistakes you've seen that both white men and black women make when trying to date each other?
Or just general attraction
or
stuff that you've
general
seen.
attraction problems.
Okay.
Like where guys screw up or where women screw up.
I actually did a whole series on this called The Guy's Guide. So this is a series geared towards non-black men who are interested in dating black women, who are like, I'm not really familiar with the culture, but I find the women beautiful. I don't want to stick my foot in my mouth. So, what can I do? And so I put a whole guy's guide together for that reason. And there's a lot of information in there, but I would say that there's a few things that are pretty obvious. So for both parties, I would say that the most important thing is to not walk in there in a situation where you're meeting somebody and you're on a first date and you have assumptions about that person, that person's ethnicity. So not having assumptions about black women, not having assumptions about white men, and really getting to know the person and understand that that person should never be the representation or the avatar of an entire group of people. Excellent. And so the goal is to look at that person from an individual basis. And what I do say is that when it comes to the first date, the issue of race shouldn't even come up. This should be about you guys getting to know each other and finding an area, because sometimes, dating different ethnicities, you may feel out of place. Say in an all black area, some black folks feel like everything is backyard barbecue, and they'll be like, what you doing with the white boy? And they feel like they can be that familiar. Or maybe the black woman feels like, the chocolate chip around, a sea of vanilla. And some black women are totally okay with that because they've been raised in white neighborhoods. I was raised in a white neighborhood, so it was nothing to me. And there are some white men who've been raised in, urban areas, and it's nothing to them. So the key is to find a place where there's common ground, where you both feel comfortable getting to know each other, and really not letting the entire basis of why you're interacting and attracted to each other be about the color of your skin. It really is about getting to know that person as an individual, and to not have stereotypes and not feel like that person represents. So if you say things like, why do black people do XYZ, as if Lakeisha is gonna know why or why do white people do XYZ, as if Greg is gonna know? You know what I mean? So it's things like that just don't allow for individuality, where you're kind of lumping everybody. And interracial relationships and interracial dating isn't going to be for everybody. It's going to be the people who are going to be able to judge people on an individual basis, the way that Martin Luther King wanted. Martin Luther King, by the way, was in love with a white woman. He wanted to marry a white woman, and it's not widely known, but yes, he did. And one of the things that he says is that he hopes that one day people will be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And it really does take that type of person, and on both sides, for people to sort of transcend what we see on the outside. And so I would say that that's the cornerstone. And if there are things that come up, like racially charged subject that you see in the media, like police brutality or things of that nature, or just conflicts as it relates to race and politics, I would say for both people is to sit back and listen to the other person and really hear what they have to say, and also try to separate those feelings from maybe that person, because a lot of what we perceive is indoctrination that maybe we're not even aware that we have ingrained in us. And sometimes it takes listening to another perspective and going through that cognitive dissonance to a place where you can meet each other somewhere in the middle, that really true change can happen.
Well, it sounds to me like, I mean, the way you're describing it is honestly how really we would recommend every date go. You know, look at a person as an individual, you know, be your best self, give the person the benefit of the doubt, listen, communicate. I mean, again, what I'm hearing from a lot of what you're saying is just basically just be open to dating someone maybe you weren't always open to, and be your best self
and treat that person like a human being.
Treat a person like a human being. Yeah, I mean, we could use a lot of this in every area, I think.
You know what the reason is?
What? Why is that?
We're all just people.
That's right.
Yes.
That is exactly right. And you know, we need to wrap up because of time, so that is a great note to end on. But we are all people. We do want to give you a chance, just before we end, just to tell our guests, our listeners, where they can find you and your excellent products that we can vouch for.
Yes.
Okay. Well, if you're looking for me on social media, you can find me on Instagram by my name at Christelyn, Christelyn. I also run a blog called Beyond Black and White. That's beyondblackwhite.com. And as you mentioned, I did write a book called Swirling, and it is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And it's very, it was published in 2012, but it's still very germane for people who are sort of new to all of this. I also am a YouTuber, so I'm on YouTube. And for Black women who are looking to sort of upgrade and level up themselves and present themselves to be the best they can, I have launched a self-improvement program called The Pink Pill, and you can get all that through my social media handles.
And we will put those in the notes so everyone can have access to those as well.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank you again, Christelyn. We always love talking to you and having you on. So we will definitely have you on in the future, hopefully. And we want we want to thank everybody for listening, and please be sure to check back in next week for another episode of the Disruptive Love Podcast.
And can I just say something really quick?
Okay, sure. Yeah.
You guys look exactly alike. Like, it's so strange.
You do know we are twins. We're twins, right?
Everything. I can't tell you apart. I don't know which is which.
Well, maybe other people watching this are having trouble. I mean, I'm David, and of course that's
Jonathan. We should probably wear a name tag.
We should probably wear name tags and remind everybody throughout the course of the podcast. So.
Right. It's really hard to tell you two apart.
Well, we are very identical. That
is 5 pounds or something. Somebody needs to
The problem is neither of us will be the one that wants.
We would argue over who has to gain.
We would argue over who had to gain the weight. That's the problem. That would be a bad fight to have. It might get personal in that a little bit. Well, thanks again, Christelyn. We appreciate having you, and be sure to check back for the next episode at disruptive.love. Thank you.